measures in place to bring relief to the Afghan people. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to remind all meeting participants that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in committee room. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you are on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair, and please keep all proceedings within the time allocated in order to have equal and fair participation amongst all. I would like to now welcome our witnesses and express our appreciation for them being here with us this evening. Witnesses have 5 minutes for opening statements per organization. From Doctors Without Borders, we have Operations Manager Martin Flockstra, Humanitarian Representative to Canada, Jason Nickerson. From UNICEF, we have Director, Office of Emergency Programs, Manuel Fontaine. And shortly from CARE Canada, we will have President and Chief Executive Officer, Barbara Graham. With this, we will start from Doctors Without Borders. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for having us at tonight's hearing. Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, is an international medical and humanitarian organization that has provided exclusively independent, impartial, and neutral humanitarian assistance since 1971 in a manner consistent with international humanitarian law and principles. MSF first worked in Afghanistan in 1980. In Afghanistan, as elsewhere, MSF negotiates our access and our protections with all parties to the conflict, and at all levels, from the most local to the most international and everyone in between. It is this model of principled humanitarian action that today and throughout the worst of the fighting has allowed MSF teams to continue to deliver medical services free of charge in 5 projects throughout Afghanistan, in Herat, Kandahar, Khost, Kunduz, and Lashkar-Gah, while also retaining a coordination team in Kabul. MSF runs its activities with 2,350 Afghan and 75 international staff and a budget of $46.7 million in 2021. We rely solely on private donations and do not accept funding from governments for our work in Afghanistan. Our medical operations address significant unmet needs among the Afghan population. For example, we assist on average 4,000 births per month in Khost and Lashkar-Gah, provide consultations to 20,000 people per month in our emergency departments, and admit more than 170 babies per month to our neonatal ward in Khost. The key focus and driver of our presence are medical needs of people like you and me. The Afghan population has been chronically exposed to conflict for decades. Additionally, they are affected by the consequences of drought, the direct and side effects of COVID, and the transition of power in August 2021. For many years, the budget of the Afghan government was largely dependent on foreign donor money. This also included the health system, which has been chronically fragile and weak. Following the abrupt stop of structural development money and the freezing of assets in August 2021, the country has tumbled into an economic, banking, and liquidity crisis, which has led to increased needs amongst the population. We want to draw the committee's attention to the deteriorating health situation in Afghanistan and the reasons for this. Most health structures in the country are under great pressure, with staff and equipment shortages, and many are closed or poorly functioning. This means that many patients cannot access the care they need, with private healthcare unaffordable for millions. These days, you have to be rich to provide your family with a meal per day, is what a patient told us recently. A doctor of a public hospital who had not received a salary for 5 months told us that they had to perform a cesarean section with the light of a flashlight app on their mobile phone since the hospital could not pay for fuel for the generator anymore. Recent funding announcements still leave the health system with far fewer funds than before and will not improve a health system that was already failing. Short-term band-aids are being handed out, whilst longer-term solutions are unknown. For months, MSF has seen increasingly higher numbers of malnourished children in its inpatient feeding centers in Helmand and Herat. This is likely due to a combination of factors: persistent drought, food scarcity, an economic and cash crisis, and a health system in a state of disarray. September was the first month in years when Afghans could move freely without fear of being caught up in conflict, and this led to a significant increase in patient numbers in MSF's facilities. This period also coincided with the suspension of funding to the health system in August, meaning that many facilities closed or stopped functioning due to a shortage of staff, supplies, and funds, leading to a further influx of patients coming to the few functional hospitals and health centers. Malnutrition is a big concern. Although admissions have decreased since September, MSF's intensive therapeutic feeding centers in Herat and Helmand are extremely busy. Children who experience malnutrition have weakened immune systems, making them more vulnerable to the effects of other health conditions. Today, in addition to the failing health system, the country now faces reported outbreaks of cholera, measles, COVID, and other infectious diseases that all necessitate their own response while placing a further strain on health systems. The ripple effect of pre-existing sanctions and the financial measures against Afghanistan's new de facto government are being felt deeply nationwide. The country faces near economic and institutional collapse, including an inability to provide most basic services and pay civil servant salaries. The population is between a rock and a hard place. The banking sector is paralyzed, which bars people from accessing their savings, and also makes it harder for organizations providing healthcare, like MSF, to pay salaries and cover the running costs of hospitals. In the places where MSF works, we see humanitarian needs are increasing, while the humanitarian response is being made more complex as a result of interconnected factors, such as international sanctions, the cash flow crisis, disruptions to the banking system, and others. We are extremely concerned about a further deterioration of the current crisis faced by the people in Afghanistan. It is essential that this committee examines the impacts of Canadian anti-terror legislation, not only on the Afghanistan crisis, but more broadly on humanitarian assistance provided inside of armed conflicts. We thank the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're happy to provide answers to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nickerson. Now we will go to UNICEF. Manuel Fontaine, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the committee to convene this meeting, which is really coming at a very crucial time for the people of Afghanistan. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Canada for being an important partner for Afghanistan and a force for good for years. And together, we all know that we've done a lot of progress over the past few years. But right now, we're facing a very, very dire humanitarian situation. I've been a humanitarian for 30 years, and I can assure you these are some of the largest numbers I've seen in my career. The country is currently facing the worst drought in 27 years, while at the same time suffering from the impact of years of conflict and insecurity, the collapsing economy, multiple disease outbreaks such as measles and diarrhea, natural disasters such as the recent earthquake, and of course the bank liquidity crisis and the impact of COVID-19. So as a result of this, the need of children and families are really unprecedented in Afghanistan. More than 24 million people, including 13 million children, in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. So for UNICEF, what it means, it's basically millions of children in Afghanistan whose outlook for 2022 is not good. Over half of all children under 5 are actually facing acute malnutrition, and 1.1 million will actually face severe acute malnutrition this year. 4 million children are out of school, 60% of them girls, and an estimated 8.8 children are at risk of dropping out if schools don't start back and they're not able to welcome them. An estimated 4 million children in need of protection, nearly a quarter of the country lacking safe drinking water, and now close to 35,000 cases of measles reported in 2021, plus, of course, the issues we're facing with the acute watery diarrhea, polio, dengue, and COVID-19. So, of course, UNICEF is on the ground, just like MSF and other colleagues. We're on the ground, and we've launched our largest appeal to reach 15 million people, including 8 million children in 2022. We really have together to avert what is the imminent collapse of critical social services, including health, nutrition, sanitation, and education services for families. So our priorities are preventing a collapse of basic services. We really actually working right frontline workers, such as health workers as part of the Sehat Money program, but also starting now payment to teachers to make sure that they actually can remain in schools and welcome children when the winter will be over quite soon. To do this, of course, we need the support of the international community in the long term as well. It is about education. It is making sure that children are not dropping out, that girls actually going back to school. An important element will be the payment of the teachers, including women teachers, of course, but also we're doing, in addition to the formal school, we have this community-based education, which is also quite important at the moment. We all know that out-of-school children are at risk of not going back, but also they're at risk of other protection risks, such as child marriage or child labor and potential risk of trafficking. And then, of course, health. UNICEF is aiming to actually provide 15 million people with life-saving care by supporting the health system through the payments, but also community capacity, vaccination, and having those mobile health services that we actually been running for quite some time. But really bringing back and keeping the health workers, the nurses, the doctors in their health facilities is crucial. And then we have also a cash program, which will allow us and is helping families to meet their basic needs. We're expanding the use of humanitarian cash transfers and have reached, for the moment, about 35,000 households, so about a bit more than 250,000 people since mid-December, just to go through the winter, but we need to actually accelerate that. So I just want to thank Canada for strong support over the years, urge them to stay engaged, really engaged in Afghanistan over the next few months, and I'm sure this committee is the proof that this is the case, and really work with us to make sure that we really avert the human disaster that we're about to see. Thanks.
Very well, under 5 minutes. So we still don't have Ms. Grantham, so we'll wait for her to come later. And within the meantime, I'm going to go to the members, and first and foremost, my own member of parliament, Madam Finlay. Please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Do not ask the chair who he voted for. You don't have to. He voted for himself in his own writing. That's right. Thank you very much for being here this evening, and especially Ms. Foxtra for being here from Amsterdam, I think you said. So that's above and beyond. Thank you very much. I'm interested in what level the Canadian government engaged with your organization during the collapse and evacuation from Afghanistan. I realize you represent 2 different organizations, so maybe each one could respond.
Who want to go first?
I'm happy to answer
the
question.
Nicholson, sure. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So we maintain a line of dialogue with the Canadian government through Global Affairs Canada on a variety of different humanitarian crises, including in Afghanistan. So as part of our mandate, we share information on unmet humanitarian needs and try and relay what it is that we're seeing in the field. And so we've maintained an open line of dialogue on the Afghanistan crisis, specifically focused on the health system and unmet health needs for many, many years, and that's been ongoing throughout. Thank you.
I understand you've been involved there since 1980, you said, but my question was, at the time of the collapse and evacuation from Afghanistan, what was the level of your ability to engage with the Canadian government?
So, I mean, it's, as I say, a very standard open dialogue, sharing of press releases, sharing of information on unmet humanitarian needs, on realities that we were seeing on the ground. So there was dialogue with Global Affairs throughout the summer and the fall, and that's ongoing.
Okay. Were you provided enough early warning and support by Canadian government departments on their departure, and what was the impact on your relief operations?
I think I'll ask my colleague to answer that question, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I do know is that also Canadian colleagues who were with us in Afghanistan had warnings on the situation. We as an organization stand next to population, and we have been able throughout the violence, which started since May, to continue to run our activities with our international and national teams. This we can only do by being in contact with all the armed actors in the conflict, and that's what we did, leading also to a situation where we had 300 staff members living for 2.5 weeks with 500 patients in the Boost Hospital in Lashkargah, and where all actors involved in the fighting ensured to avoid the hospital at that time. That was last summer.
Do you have any comments, Mr. Fontaine?
Sure. I mean, for UNICEF, just like the rest of the UN, but the humanitarian side of the UN, we've made the decision that we would stay and deliver inside Afghanistan. I was myself actually in Kabul at the time, and so we stayed there. We didn't have. I mean, we did share, just like colleagues from MSF, of course, information about humanitarian needs on a regular basis, but didn't necessarily have a more regular contact on the actual issues around evacuation. UNICEF did take part in the protection of children at the airport during the evacuations of children from Kabul, together with the people who were at the airport at the time, particularly the unaccompanied children, making sure they get reunited to their families. We did make our own decisions. The UN, we have, of course, our own decision-making process when it comes to security and whether we stay or we don't stay, which we followed and decided to stay. So general information about what's happening was regular, but that's pretty much it. The rest we went on with our own mission.
So I'm very interested in your experience with getting to the Kabul airport and the evacuation at the airport. Could you talk more about that? What level of assistance you had, or were you dealing directly? We know it was pretty chaotic, but perhaps you could give us the benefit.
Well, we were basically asked by particularly the U.S., who were actually managing the airport at the time, largely, as you know, we were told that they were having a number of children who were unaccompanied, were on their own, and needed some assistance. So we did place a number of child protection officers inside the airport to make sure these children be identified, that they've been registered, and that if they could be reunited to their families inside Kabul, that happened, or if they were to be evacuated, that we do not lose track of them, and that they can be followed after that in Doha or other places and be reunited after that. So, this is what a number of organizations do in situations like that, which is to keep track of children, making sure they do not get abandoned and forgotten, and make sure we keep track and we reunite them, and which is what we've done.
How am I doing for time, Mr. Chair?
10 seconds if you want to.
10 seconds.
Yes.
Is there any country other than the U.S. that you turn to in Canada's absence to help you out?
We did work with countries where children, like for example, Qatar. Some of the children went to Qatar, so we had to be in touch with them, and but the main issue was around the Kabul airport. We did not get involved in the rest.
And I'm going to go to now Mr. Sidhu for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's quite a time and experience to hear from your guys' real journey and adventure on the ground there. And I really want to turn to Ms. Flokstra and Mr. Nickerson in my question. You mentioned some of the work that you're doing on the ground. You mentioned, I think, over 70 international team members in Afghanistan and hundreds of local individuals supporting your work on the ground. Can you speak to more about how many of your members are there on the ground now? I don't know if that was past tense or it's current. And have the Taliban allowed you to continue your operations in, I think you mentioned 5 provinces that you're operating in?
Yeah, so we are still with around 75 international staff on the ground, and in total we have 2,300 local colleagues. So we are continuing to function. This has since the 15th of August not partially changed. One hand, we are able to move more around, and that is for the first time in decades. That was impossible before the 15th of August. And we can exactly provide our health care as before with women, and have female staff is working with us. Also, female patients are able to come to our facilities. In some areas like the south, it was already a year ago the situation that women needed to be accompanied to come to the hospital. But we are fully accepted to deliver our impartial and principled medical care, which we provide since decades in Afghanistan. Yes.
Well, thank you for all of your hard work. It's a tremendous undertaking, and so I really appreciate everything that you're doing. A lot of your organization and Mr. Fontaine's organization may have been in touch with local Canadian organizations on the ground or organizations from other countries. Have you heard from the other organizations that are still on the ground if the Taliban is directing where some of the aid or where some of your help flows? I think Mr. Fontaine mentioned you're in touch with some of the frontline teachers on the ground. If you can speak more on that.
I mean, first of all, we have about 400 people in Afghanistan at the moment. We have 5 small offices, 1 main office in Kabul, and 5 other offices, and a number of posts as well. So, and our colleagues can function, can move. Actually, we've been frankly able to access more territory over the past few months than we've been able to do before, because simply insecurity has improved to some extent, and so it's been easier for colleagues to move around. So I think we need just to say that. I mean, it's not always easy, but it's been fairly feasible to move around. Now the NGOs have maybe different experiences. One thing we know is that it depends also a little bit on regions. Some regions seems to be a little bit easier, others seem to be a little bit more complicated, and it varies. It just moves. So we need to keep track. We need to be, of course, engaging and careful. But I want to say that so far, at the moment, it's been easier for us to be able to move around and assess needs and see the reality of needs on the ground.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Chair, how much time? I think 2 minutes left.
2.5 minutes left.
Okay. I wanted to hear from Ms. Grantham, but I guess I'll let my colleagues ask those questions. And I want to hear more from Mr. Fontaine. You mentioned that I think you said 4 million children are out of school right now, and a large majority of that is the girls. I really want to know and learn more about on the education aspect. Is the Taliban allowing girls to attend school? Are they allowing the female teachers to work? If you can speak more on that angle as well.
Just very rapidly, 20 years ago, when the Taliban left, we had 1 million children in school. As of last year, we had 10 million children in school. So we had managed to actually increase the participation in school by 10. And there's still 4 million children out of school. So there were still children even before the Taliban got back into Kabul who were not in school, and those were the 4 million. What we're worried about now is losing the 10 million or even 8 million of those who were in school until August. Now, what we know at the moment, it's the winter. In the winter, 2/3 of the schools are actually closed because it's winter. So we will see better in March how this is going to look like. What it seems is that for primary school, it's not going to be really a problem to get girls back in school. Secondary school might be a little bit more difficult. So far, we're getting some form of assurances that girls will be allowed to school as long as some guarantees are given in terms of separation of classes and making sure that women teachers teach girls while boys are being taught by male teachers. But we will see how that goes, where, we will see more when we get into March, if this is actually happening or not. Primary school shouldn't be too much of a problem, and we've seen girls going back to school fairly rapidly.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Nick, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, through you, I want to ask Mr. Nickerson if he had anything else to add. I know you were kind of rushed in your remarks at the end there, but I think I got like 30 seconds. So I just want to make sure I hear some of the important aspects of your opening remarks as well.
Certainly, we will make a written submission to the committee, but we wanted to emphasize the fact that I think several of the witnesses have spoken about the impact of sanctions and anti-terror laws, and that these sanctions and anti-terror laws, as they apply in Afghanistan, need to be placed in a broader context of their impact on humanitarian assistance in other areas of armed conflict as well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. Before I go to Mr. Bruno Desap, on behalf of all members of Parliament from CARE Canada, President and Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Barbara Grantham is here, so I welcome you, Ms. Grantham. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation to the committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. I am very sorry. I had one of those horrible technological nightmares signing on, and I am here and I'm going to proceed, and I ask for your patience and my very sincere apologies. Depuis nos bureaux situés.
From our offices on the unceded and unabandoned territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting us to appear as part of this study. CARE has been working in Afghanistan since 1961, with generous Canadian funding since 2001.
Two key messages for this committee this evening. First, as Mr. Nickerson has already alluded, the Canadian anti-terror legislation currently bars humanitarian organizations from implementing Canadian-funded programs in Afghanistan, and this must be addressed immediately. The humanitarian imperative to respond is clear, with concurrent crises leading up to the takeover and escalating dramatically since then. And yet humanitarian organizations like CARE are unable to respond. The Taliban is on Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act list of terrorist entities and are the country's de facto government. The view is that paying ordinary taxes on rent, salaries, imports, etc., would violate Canada's criminal code, which make it a criminal offense to, quote, make available resources and services, knowing that they will be used by or will benefit a terrorist group, unquote. The intent of this legislation was never to impede life-saving humanitarian support from reaching the most vulnerable people in Afghanistan, but this is the result. CARE has been unable to implement Canadian-funded programs in Afghanistan since August of 2021. Our mobile health teams cannot travel to remote areas, purchase medicine, or provide protection or nutrition services in a country in which 1 million children are at risk of dying of malnutrition. Canada
is the only institutional donor of CARE institution whose funding has not resumed.
The law also does not align with the vision and objectives of Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, which acknowledges that, quote, we need to be willing to take responsible risks with decisions based on evidence and learning, unquote. The policy itself acknowledges that delivering responsive and accountable assistance for meaningful social change cannot be achieved without this. And as such, we urge the Government of Canada to pursue all innovative solutions that ensure that Canadian humanitarian organizations can resume operations without exposure to criminal liability, as per the UNSCR in the short and the long term. My second message to you this evening is that gender equality and the response efforts of women, humanitarian and civil society leaders must be prioritized in Canada's support to Afghanistan. Principled humanitarian action must reach all people in need, and it's necessary to acknowledge that gender inequality persists and leads women and girls and marginalized people to be disproportionately affected by crises like this one. Of the 22.8 million people facing acute food insecurity, half of them are women and girls. And of the more than 500,000 people displaced in 2021, at least 80% of them are women and children. For this reason, local women's leadership is critical to delivering humanitarian aid, especially in marginalized communities, and it must be prioritized in the response efforts. And yet women-led NGOs' own ability to deliver services to communities is severely constrained by the ongoing economic and liquidity crisis, as you have learned, and they are unable to access funds to run their operations. While it's possible in some provinces, the full participation of women humanitarian staff remains limited, which risks marginalizing women and girls even further. So to conclude, first, we urge Canada to pursue all innovative solutions that allow Canadian humanitarian organizations to resume programming in Afghanistan in the short and long term. And number two, Canada must prioritize the leadership of women humanitarian staff and civil society organizations in our response. Flexible, predictable funding must reach these local responders, and the newly established Afghan Women Advisory Group, which informs the humanitarian country team's engagement with the Taliban, must also be supported by Canada. Merci au comité.
Thank you to committee members. I'm very much looking forward to having an exchange with you during our discussion period.
And I look forward to your questions.
Grantham, now I will go to Honourable Member Mr. Brunel de Sepp for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to all of our witnesses who are here with us this evening. Mr. Fontaine pointed out that he was very glad that we struck this committee, and I'd just like to remind my honourable committee members from all parties that the mandate of this committee is very clear. My party had moved the initial motion, and the focus would be on the humanitarian crisis of the day and on the short-term future. So I'd like members to remember what we voted on in the House of Commons so that we can help folks on the ground right now and find solutions in short order thanks to the creation of this committee. Ms. Grantham, during your opening remarks, you mentioned, and there were witnesses last week who also referred to this aspect of what's occurring in Afghanistan currently, to the effect that perhaps we need to amend the criminal code so that NGOs out in the field can operate without the fear of funding from terrorist organizations. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Ms. Grantham, and also perhaps Mr. Fontaine or Mr. Nickerson. I think that this is a crucial aspect we need to address.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur Brunet.
Well, thank you very much.
Let me make it clear that CARE Canada's Canadian funding is effectively not operational on the ground in Afghanistan because of the restrictions of the criminal code. And the current framing of the criminal code, as interpreted by the government, is that the risk of prosecution under the code would be entirely borne by humanitarian organizations like CARE if we were to proceed without an exemption or some form of workaround or a change to the legislation as the current criminal code sits. All of those are options. We have been working actively with counterparts inside the Government of Canada to endeavor to bring those options to bear. But the reality is that the timeline here does not jive with the timeline that you have heard from Monsieur Fontaine in terms of the short-term acute nature of this crisis. And I really want to emphasize Canada is the only significant donor funder, sovereign funder to Afghanistan that has not provided some form of exemption or change to its criminal code framework that enables the humanitarian organizations from those countries to operate. So in the case of CARE, all of our CARE compatriots across the Confederation globally are able to operate in Afghanistan with the exception of CARE Canada. Merci.
Mr. Nickerson.
Mr. Fontaine, would you like to chime in? You might have an opinion on the matter, given that you're from UNICEF and you deal with a lot of NGOs. Do you experience the same thing on the field? Response. Well, we're part of the UN system, so we obviously have our own system of immunity, which is different, but it's obviously a problem for NGOs, and it's a problem for funding, particularly mobilizing Canadian funding, because Canadian funds can only be used outside Afghanistan. For example, one can buy equipment from abroad and bring it in, pay staff. However, if you want to work with local NGOs or civil society, you can't do so with Canadian funding. And that's obviously a problem there. It's even more problematic for NGOs because they don't have the immunity and privilege that the United Nations benefits from. Mr. Nickerson, it's your turn. You're an NGO. You're directly affected. What do you think should be done to the criminal code in Canada? Would it help you if it was amended?
Thank you for the question. Again, I just want to reiterate that our activities in Afghanistan are privately funded, so our perspective on this is slightly different from other organizations who are receiving Canadian government funding. MSF is unique in that situation, so our situation is slightly different. However, with regards to Canada's anti-terror legislation, yes, I mean the short answer is yes. There is a problem that needs to be fixed here. At the moment, there is no humanitarian defense or humanitarian exemption that exists in Canadian law. So we would agree that there is a problem here and the potential for humanitarian activities to become encumbered in some way by these laws. This is not a problem that, as I say, that's specific to Afghanistan. It's a problem that needs to be addressed to ensure that Canadian laws do not interfere with humanitarian organizations' ability to provide humanitarian assistance inside of all armed conflicts.
Mr. Bruno Dessap.
Yes, I have a question for Ms. Grantham. Now, based on our understanding, the Taliban is attacking many sectors of the population in what it is doing. For example, LGBTQ members of that community. What are you seeing out in the field, and what are the options for those on the ground that are members of that community? And could you please shed light on what can be done to help those folks out on the ground?
The time is up, though. Go ahead, Madam Grantham.
Okay, merci. I would reiterate, Monsieur Brunet Duceppe, my comments that that nature of this such that women and girls and marginalized communities, in which I would include LGBTQ Afghans, are significantly, disproportionately, negatively impacted by the current nature of the crisis. And while Canadian funding is not currently activated in Afghanistan, as I think we've made clear in this presentation already, we're in very, very close and regular touch with our other care colleagues on the ground in Afghanistan. The nature of the programs that we're providing are largely in the area of healthcare, nutrition, protection services, particularly for women who are victims of gender-based violence, and girls who are victims of violence, largely delivered through mobile health teams in a number of provinces across the country. We also do a lot of primary health care in the whole area of COVID-19 response, vaccinations, first aid, trauma support, sexual and reproductive health services, and so on. We do a lot of work in the whole area of nutrition, infant and child.
Madam Grantham, please wrap up because you're already a minute and a half over.
Okay, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for having been so indulgent.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno de Sepp. Now I will go to Honourable Member Parliament for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think you meant me as the next questioner, so I'll proceed. I just want to say thank you to all the witnesses for your presentation today, but in addition to that, for the ongoing work that you do in the global community. There are many humanitarian crises, and you've always been there, so I very much appreciate that. I'd like to first turn my question to Ms. Grantham, just to sort of carry on the issue around your inability to provide aid. Canadian organizations on the ground, you're not the only one. Last week, we heard from other organizations as well. Now, this has been going on since August of 2021. As you've indicated, could you advise when was the last time you had a substantive discussion about this with the government, and when you brought this to their attention, and what was their response?
We're in contact with the government every week, frankly, trying to find various approaches to resolve the issue, and we have been for since probably October or November. So we're in very, very regular touch with colleagues across a number of departments, chiefly Global Affairs Canada, because that's the funder and the holder of the contracts, obviously, in the first place. But I know they're working with other departments to try and find a solution to this. And I do believe there's a clear understanding and acknowledgement of the issue and the imperative of the issue. The unfortunate thing is that the sense of urgency that we feel is not aligned with the timeline that government seems to feel is possible. And we're running against a clock. We're running against a clock of weather, and we're running against a clock of famine and malnutrition.
Thank you very much. I fully understand the urgency of the situation, because children are starving now and they need the aid now. While we talk about it, it does not help them at this point. Other jurisdictions have managed to find a workaround, find an exemption, but Canada still have not been able to do so. And that's mystifying to me. And so I'm gathering from you that the urgency is of utmost, and that your recommendation to the government is to act forthwith to either provide an exemption or work around similar to that of other jurisdictions. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I know that with the other two organizations, because your stature may be a little bit different, but you're seeing that on the ground as well, NGOs. Could I just quickly ask both Mr. Fontaine and Mr. Nickerson, would you agree that the government needs to act forthwith to either provide an exemption or work around to Canadian organizations so that they can provide aid on the ground in Afghanistan now? Mr. Fontaine?
What I would say is anything that at the moment is an obstacle to providing humanitarian assistance, urgent humanitarian assistance it needs to be looked at very carefully and needs to be worked on. And I mean, as you know, the Security Council has adopted a resolution bringing exemptions to the sanctions regime for the UN. But it's important that all countries absolutely move on that.
Nickerson.
Mr. Nickerson?
Yes, we would agree. I mean, obstacles need to be removed to ensure that humanitarian organizations are able to do their work and to respond to needs on the ground. So, yes.
Thank you. And I gather from your comments, it's not just for Afghanistan. Obviously, we have to deal with that, but for other countries as well. Mr. Nickerson, I'd like to just ask you, in terms of Doctors Without Borders, I'm sure that on the ground you're working day and night to provide assistance and support to people, and those who face persecution, who's been attacked because of the persecution from the Taliban. Are you able to provide aid to them as well? And particularly for those who are in hiding, women and girls who may be in hiding, how do they go about getting aid?
I'll ask my colleague, Ms. Flaxter, to respond, please.
What we see is basically we see a steep increase of patients, meaning that, of course, also as a consequence that a large part of the health system is not functioning, has collapsed, is now somehow kept afloat, because that is what is currently happening with the humanitarian assistance, the humanitarian funding, which is reaching the country. Systems are kept afloat, still extremely fragile. So we are in our hospitals, we are, as we have done for the past decades, treating patients patients who are victims of violence. That can be domestic violence or other violence. I would like to reiterate that that there is a structural problem, and that the humanitarian assistance now given is so required, but it is very unclear what the future is going to bring. And as we said, it's a band-aid to a current situation, whilst the future is unknown. A humanitarian need is about the need of a person. It's a disease, and a disease does not have a political preference. And I think that should be crucial in humanitarian assistance.
Thank you very much. The time is up, and I see Madam Grantham, you have raised a hand. Do you want to say something in 10 seconds, 15 seconds?
I will say it in 10 seconds. I just wanted to specifically answer Ms. Khan's question. I want to reiterate what I said earlier about the importance of local women-led NGOs within the Afghan context. They are absolutely critical to creating safe environments for women and girls, and creating the cohort of women leaders in Afghanistan with Canadian support to build up those women-led women's rights organizations. We have a very critical instrumental role as Canada that we can play.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Khan. And now we'll go to the second round. And from the Conservative Party, Honourable Member Mr. Rapp, for 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and my thanks to the witnesses for coming today, and for all your members of your organizations. I'll get into a bit more details, but having spent time in Afghanistan, I know how difficult a theater or country it is, and the risks that so many NGOs take. So a couple real quick questions that should require quick answers. Ms. Grantham, just you talked about a specific women's program. Could you just spell that out or repeat it again? I missed the title there.
Sure. As a Canadian humanitarian organization operating in Afghanistan until August, one of the key roles that we were able to undertake with support from the Government of Canada was to build up the cadre, the cohort, if you like, of local women's organizations in Afghanistan, led by women, Afghan women.
What's the name of that program, ma'am?
I don't have, if there were a number of programs.
That you gave one just in your opening 5 minutes, that right at the end, it was one of the last things you said.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'll go back and check
All
my
right,
notes
thanks.
and I'll turn my mic back on.
So my next question to all three organizations, really simple, is you've all sort of stated you've been in communications with the Liberal government. When was the last time any of your organizations met with any Liberal government minister, and who?
Mr. Nickerson, and then Fontaine, and then Madam Grantham. Go ahead, Mr. Nickerson.
Thank you for the question. So just so I understand your question is, when is the last time that we met with a minister?
Sorry, I said, when was the last time Doctors Without Borders met with any of the ministers?
We haven't met with a minister, I don't believe, since the election. So it would have been sometime in 2021.
Thank you.
Mr. Fontaine.
So I'm sorry, I don't know, because I'm not in charge of our relationship with Canada and the regular contact with them, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Fontaine. Could you follow up with the committee and just get that information and send it back to the committee, please?
Sure.
On behalf of CARE Canada, I can inform this committee that we have met with Minister Sajjan as part of larger roundtables within the family, if you like, of organizations in the broader international NGO ecosystem, if you like, in Canada. We've met with him, I believe, 3 times on issues that have ranged from the broad international humanitarian imperative to Afghanistan specifically, to the issue of sexual and reproductive rights and nutrition. So they've been issue specific or a geography specific broader roundtable of a number of organizations.
So when was that, ma'am?
The most recent one was last week, but there have probably been 3 or 4 since.
All right,
since the beginning of January.
That's great, ma'am. So, look, I know I only got about a minute and a half left. So, as I mentioned, I've spent over a year and a bit of my life in Afghanistan. I know how difficult it is to work with or deal with the Taliban, and to build upon what Mr. Alex Dessette, or Brunel Dessette, sorry, and Madam Kwan brought forward, is just how difficult it is, and to ensure that this aid is getting there. So, if I understand correctly, I think the part of the challenge is this anti-terror laws that the government has failed to take any action on in a timely manner, much like what we saw leading up to last summer and the Taliban takeover, is just trying to understand why they're failing to do this. But at the same time, how can your NGOs ensure that the money, once it could flow again, is going to get to those actual minorities, girls in particular, that the Taliban have no time for, and the other minority groups that are in Afghanistan?
Who are you addressing? Oh, is that to me? Sorry, my apologies. We, as I said, we have in the broader Confederation of CARE, there are, I believe, 6 or 8 members within the CARE Confederation that all support a variety of programs across Afghanistan. So we have long established relationships with various departments that deliver services across the country, along with literally dozens of, as I said, women's rights and youth rights, girls' rights organizations across the country. And the full and complete and appropriate accounting and auditing of all of those finances over the years has frankly not been not in any way brought into question over time.
Now we will go to Mr. Baker, then we'll go to, after Mr. Baker, we'll go to Mr. Brunel Dessep. So, Mr. Baker, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to all our witnesses for being here and for the incredible work that you do on the ground. I'd like to start on the issue of the anti-terror legislation, Ms. Grantham, that you've raised and others have spoken about. And so my understanding is that this is being treated urgently. I think my understanding of the situation is that, and Ms. Grantham, please correct me if this is incorrect, that this legislation, the Canadian legislation you're talking about, the anti-terror legislation, was brought in by the prior government at the time under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and that it is unique in the international context. And so that is my understanding of the situation, that we're both treating it urgently, but also that the legislation is unique and that the challenges are difficult to overcome. Is that correct? Am I right in understanding that?
So I will be honest with you, the finer points of the legislation are beyond my remit for this evening. But what I can say is that Canada's legislation is unique relative to our sort of OECD peers, if I can put it that way. And in that, I would include the US, the EU, Australia, the UK, in that we don't provide an explicit provision within the legislation for humanitarian exemptions. And we do not provide an explicit override of some kind, provision or capability within the legislation explicitly. And so we're trying to do that in a post-legislative environment, which is imminently more challenging.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it sounds like, and I'm not professing to be the expert on it, but it sounds like we need a legislative fix to fix a legislation that doesn't permit you to do your work, essentially.
Madam Grantham, excuse me, Madam Grantham, could you please raise your mic a bit, please?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, go ahead now.
I'd like to ask a question about how your non-Canadian partners operate, and I'll ask you, Ms. Grantham, this question. How do you know how your non-Canadian partners operate to ensure that funds don't go to where they're supposed to go, right? To the women and girls, and not to the Taliban, for example, or other places they shouldn't go.
Madam Grantham.
CARE has been in Afghanistan since 1961. We are, I believe, the longest serving, or certainly one of the longest serving international NGOs working in the country. So we have deep, historical, trusted relationships with partners, with leaders, with local and provincial leaders and supporters all over the country of many, many years standing. And with that, we also have very extensive monitoring systems in place that we have had in place in many cases now for 20 to 50 or 60 years. We have recently established, as I mentioned at the end of my prepared remarks, we've recently established the Afghan Women Advisory Group, which is advising our humanitarian country teams' engagement with the Taliban. So we have an interlocutor, if you like, between ourselves as civil society organizations and the Taliban to ensure that the intent of what we're there to achieve and the monitoring systems in place are working to our satisfaction and in a way that fulfills the commitments to the people of Afghanistan that we have made.
Understood.
30 seconds.
How much time do I have?
30 seconds. Quickly,
Ms. Grant. 30. I'll be quick. To Ms. Grantham, I've taken your point about the importance of local women-based NGOs. Back many years ago, I was a volunteer in Rwanda, working with women social entrepreneurs and NGOs, and completely appreciate the importance of what you're saying there. So just wanted to say that. And lastly, if this legislative challenge was overcome in 20 seconds or less, where would you dedicate your resources? Where would your help go first?
Our help would go first to the immediate health services, the mobile health services, and the services that women and girls need from the perspective of safety, their physical safety and their emotional and mental safety, first and foremost. Secondly, to their health, and thirdly, to their ability to earn a livelihood, in that order.
Thank you. Even though the time is up, but I want to be fair and equitable, so I'll give 2.5 minutes to finish off the round to Mr. Brunel de Sepp and then Madam Kwan. Please be precise in time-wise. Thank you, Mr. Brunel de Sepp, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking the witnesses for taking part in our panel today. It's crucial, very important study, and I apologise that they had to deal with the Conservatives and Liberals attacking each other, but you're not going to have to deal with that with me. I'm going to get straight to the point, and I want to see in the report. I want this to be in the report. This is what you're experiencing on the ground. Based on some reports, up until last year, there are many humanitarian workers that have worked who have been injured. And are those figures ongoing and constant, or is there an increasing danger since August to the kinds of work that they are engaging in? And my question is for all witnesses.
Go ahead.
Mr. Fontaine, if you will. Yes, response. As far as humanitarian aid workers for the UN are concerned, and my colleagues can confirm this, but we've had favoured access. We've been able to circulate better in Afghanistan since August. We're not sure that this will continue or last, but we have enjoyed greater capacity, which has given us opportunity to see just how great the humanitarian needs are on the ground, to see their breadth and depth, and also to see how crucial it is to respond quickly. It's improved, but it could deteriorate just as quickly. Question, Médecins Frontières, your thoughts?
Give Mr. Nickerson and a chance because your time is already up. Mr. Nickerson, you want to say something?
I would like to take this one.
Go ahead, please.
The last time that we lost a lot of colleagues in Afghanistan was when the Kunduz hospital was bombarded in an aerial bombardment by the US Army. That was the last time that we really had a major loss. Of course, there was an attack on the Dashtibashi maternity 1.5 year ago. And currently the situation is very fluid. But as we also said in our presentation, the security situation is as such that we can continue our activities at times easier than before the transition of power. Thank you.
And minutes, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, is it my turn now?
Yes, please.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to just follow up with Ms. Grantham. I understand that the idea is that we may need legislative changes, but in light of the urgency of the situation, would a proposal such as if the government came to your organization that's well established for many years in terms of your humanitarian aid work, that they offer a memorandum of agreement, a legal document to exempt prosecution for your organization and your aid workers, and to also exempt any approach to potentially putting your organization in jeopardy in terms of your charitable status? Would that suffice as a workaround or an idea such as that? Somebody who's a lawyer, much brighter than me, can actually propose these ideas and come up with the documentations.
Well, I wouldn't presume a lawyer is necessarily brighter than you. What I would say is that is one of the options that we have been actively pursuing. If we were to be in a real-time situation presented with an option along those lines, and our legal counsel assured us as an organization that it removed the risk to a tolerable level for us, then we would very, very positively respond to that. That's exactly the kind of scenario we are hoping for.
Thank you so much. a walk around and then also being innovative. Because if we think legislation is the only way to go, we will never get there and people will continue to die. Just very quickly, I want to ask this question, Ms. Grantham, of you as well. In the on the ground organizations, the women's and girls organizations on the ground, many of them, of course, are in hiding, fearing for their life. And I would expect that some of them would be looking to see how they can leave Afghanistan. But as it stands right now, the Canadian government does not allow for refugee status for those in Afghanistan. They have to get to a third country. Are you hearing those concerns on the ground with people who are fearing for their lives?
I should be very clear. Our current programs are paused, so we are not in the position to hear that level of detailed information in a day-to-day way. I think it is fair to say that for women in Afghanistan, their full participation in civic life is very, very limited and highly variable across the country.
Thank you, Madam Kwan. Your time is up now. So on behalf of all members of Parliament, sorry, Madam Kwan.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject on that question, I wonder if the witnesses can just send in their written response.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Kwan. On behalf of all members of Parliament, I would like to thank all the witnesses, for their participation in this important work. If you have anything to add, you're welcome to submit it to the committee clerk. I would really appreciate it. So I'm going to suspend the meeting for a few minutes before we do the sound check for the next panel. So thank you. Give everyone a fair chance in the last round. I would like to take consensus from the committee members if I can extend this session by 15 minutes to be fair with the witnesses, if I have the unanimous consent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I would like to make few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on microphone icon to activate your mic. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Interpretation is in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of the screen of either floor English or French. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. I would now like to welcome our witnesses and express our appreciation for you being with us this evening. Witnesses, you have 5 minutes for opening statements per organization. Among us, from Afghan Youth Engagement and Development Initiative, we have Ms. Khalida Nasiri. From Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services, we have Mr. Ali Mirzad and Mr. William Maley. And from Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, we have Ms. Oates. Now we can start with the witnesses. We'll go to Ms. Nasiri for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the honorable members of the Special Committee on Afghanistan. The Afghan Youth Engagement and Development Initiative, known as IDE, is a not-for-profit organization that builds civic engagement and social development among Afghan Canadian youth. While we do not have a presence in Afghanistan, we work with refugee youth and families within Canada and have been actively engaged in advocacy around the crisis. Our group is led by Afghan youth who have family members both within and outside of Afghanistan impacted by the crisis. It's important to set the context for Canada's role in Afghanistan because the scope of our response so far has unfortunately been insufficient. While Canada has contributed to important gains with respect to the rights of women and girls and other development progress, we were also involved in a combat mission and a war. About 48,000 Afghan civilian lives were lost, and that's according to conservative estimates. 159 Canadian Armed Forces members, Canadian accountants, a Canadian journalist, and other Canadians working there lost their lives. We have a moral obligation to those who died and to those still there doing everything they can to prevent mass death and economic collapse, to take on a much bigger and vocal role in the response to the crisis. Afghanistan is in a full-blown crisis with its economy in free fall. Millions of children and youth are losing their formative years for development. Young Afghans have known nothing but conflict and instability their entire lives. Children do not know the definition of home. According to the UN, 4.2 million young Afghans are out of school and 60% of those are girls. This number will increase to 7.9 million without interventions. Children and youth cannot study if their stomachs are empty. According to UNICEF, in 2022, 1.1 million children will be in need of treatment for acute malnutrition. Afghanistan is marching towards famine, and this means Afghan children and youth are at heightened risk of child labor, early marriage, recruitment by insurgents, and a bleak future. According to first-hand accounts we've heard from humanitarian partners and families on the ground, girls are not going to school, families have lost breadwinners to hunger. Mothers are making impossible decisions between selling their daughters or their kidneys to feed their families, and young women are being forced to hide for wanting to participate in society, be it through protesting for their rights or showcasing talents like singing. Canadian charity organizations with operations in Afghanistan are facing restrictions from their banks presumably because of the gray area in Canada's Criminal Code Section 8303. But Canada has an opportunity for leadership. In line with Canada's feminist international assistance policy and standing in the world as a human rights advocate, we must act. We have several recommendations to the committee. First, we acknowledge the $66.5 million in aid that Canada has committed to since August 2021, but more is needed in the short term and more is needed now. As previous colleagues have noted, without urgent stabilization of the hunger crisis and economy, a disaster is approaching in mid 2022, which can include mass displacement into countries beyond neighboring ones. Second, the humanitarian crisis response must include a refugee response component. We need to waive bureaucratic documentation and anything else needed to expedite resettlement. Luckily, in Canada, we have where prima facie status was designated to Syrian refugees during the Syrian crisis. In fact, since 2003, we have assigned prima facie status to Bhutanese, Karen, and Somali Madhaban refugees. We cannot forget those at heightened risk who are internally displaced within Afghanistan as well, who we should assign temporary residence permits to, a call echoed by the Canadian Bar Association. We must commit to an accelerated timeline within 2022 to meet the commitment of 40,000 refugees, and we should accept more. We should not err on the side of caution. We should err on the side of generosity. Third, Canada should make efforts to reduce the impact of sanctions and counter-terrorism measures on the provision of funding and the flow of goods into the country. While concerns about money getting into the hands of insurgency groups are valid, we need to listen to what Afghans are saying, which is that they need help. In this situation, there is no perfect decision, there is only the right one. Finally, we need to ensure that the de facto institution and all parties uphold their obligations under international human rights law and ensure respect for the rights of all Afghans, including children's right to education. Mr. Chair, Canada's position as an international advocate for human rights and justice depends on our response to this crisis. We urge Canada to act today, not tomorrow. Thank you.
Very much right on time. Now we'll go to Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je tiens tout.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to begin by thanking you and your colleagues in attendance here this evening for this opportunity that's been afforded to us to have these very important discussions.
Here today what we had already conveyed to the House of Commons Human Rights Subcommittee in June 2021, less than 7 months ago, that I am a Hazara Canadian, that Hazaras have suffered over a century and a half of perpetual persecution, that our people have been the victims of genocidal atrocities during the Taliban's previous rule in the 90s, when we were hunted, singled out, labeled, and slaughtered for simply being a Hazara. No, Mr. Chair. Today I stand before you as a Canadian Afghanistani because the pain and suffering that has been inflicted upon my native homeland is hurting all of us, regardless of our ethnicity, whether we are Hazara, Pashtun, Tajik, Uzbek, Imak, or any of the other ethnicities that form the rich fabric of Afghanistan. We are all hurting. We're all in this together. Mr. Chair, by Friday, August 13, 2021, as the Taliban were advancing towards the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, Canada announced that it would resettle 20,000 vulnerable and at-risk Afghanistanis, which would have included women leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, persecuted minorities, LGBTQI member, and family of resettled interpreters. 2 days later, on Sunday, August 15th, the Taliban seized Kabul. The previous Afghan government fled away in helicopters, effectively surrendering the country and abandoning its roughly 38 million people. Unfortunately, on that very same day, the Canadian Parliament was dissolved, and along with it, any hope that Afghanistanis had to be rescued simultaneously evaporated. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes extrêmement...
Mr. Chairperson, we're extremely grateful that Canada has taken the initiative and leadership on the world stage with its big promises full of hope for the future of Afghans.
Canada further increased that bold commitment from 20,000 to 40,000. Yet, to this day, scores of desperate Afghanistanis remain stranded within Afghanistan, while thousands more that had fled to neighboring countries now live as illegal aliens and must face the daily fear of deportation back to the Taliban's gulags. Mr. Chair, The landmass of Canada is 3.8 million square miles compared to the US 3.7 million square miles. This quite simply means that Canada is a bigger country than the United States, specifically 1.6% larger, but with only 1/8 of the population that the US has. Yet Canada has only resettled 1/10 of Afghanistanis than what our southern neighbors have thus far done. It is reported that the US has evacuated 76,000 as opposed to Canada's 7,200. Meanwhile, as the cold, unforgiving winter weather besieges Afghanistan, hundreds, if not thousands, are homeless, sleeping in the streets, public parks, while many other fleeing danger that have taken refuge to the mountains are freezing. According to the World Food Program, 60% of Afghanistanis are now food insecure, and the United Nations Development Food Program reports that 97% of the population could fall into poverty by spring 2022. Children, young girls are openly sold by desperate parents simply because they cannot afford to feed their own children. Women activists, human rights defenders, and other ethnic minorities such as Hazars have been dragged, beaten, and abducted. The fate of many of these people remain unknown to this day, while the remains of some have been returned to their families. Monsieur le Président, cela est inacceptable.
Mr. Chairperson, this is unacceptable. How can each of us sleep at night attesting to all of this suffering? Mr. Chairperson, the good news is that we are able to change all of this.
And we must do everything in our power to change that. Canada does not only have a big landmass, but also a big heart. Canada's goodwill and generosity can, in fact, ensure that no other girl is ever sold for food. Time and again, we have demonstrated that to the world, be it with the 70s Vietnam boat people, or more recently in 2015 with the Syrian crisis, and we can do it again. Mr. Chair, across this vast country, Canadian Afghanistanis are extremely grateful for the enduring commitment that Canada has had to our people and our native homeland. Canadians have fought with tears and sweat and even bled for the betterment of Afghanistan. But bold commitment, Chair, will not get us there. We need concrete actions that must be executed immediately while there's still time. Therefore, we call upon the Canadian government to, 1, appoint an ambassador at large for Afghanistan to ensure that Afghanistan's crisis is addressed through a timely and effective multi-pronged approach rooted in human rights, humanitarian aid, resettlement, and diplomacy. 2, work with the international community in utilizing all available tools to pressure the Taliban in immediately releasing all those that remain in their captivity. 3, engage with countries neighboring Afghanistan to open their borders to Afghanistani refugees and uphold the right of refugees, including honoring the principle of non-refoulement.
Thank you, Mr. Mirjad. If you can quickly wrap up, you're already 45 seconds.
Absolutely. I would say, Mr. Chair, that the last 2 points would be first, the commitment of the 40,000 that Canada has committed to increase that and to have a more precise approach on how it intends to accomplish that. And lastly, to remove any impediment on private sponsorship and sponsorship agreement holder to allow people to bring people in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mirjad. And now we'll go to Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. Ms. Oates, for 5 minutes, please.
Sure. Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Lauren Oates, and I represent a Canadian charity, Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, that was established during the first Taliban regime. We've operated in Afghanistan for 2 decades, planning and implementing education programming in the areas of teacher education, literacy, and technology for education, besides advocating for the equal right to education. Various projects under our purview over the years have been funded by the Government of Canada, and for this we are most grateful. I'll describe some of the issues and challenges that we're observing within the sector as a whole, as well as specific issues facing our operations in Afghanistan, but which may also represent the situation of other organizations like ours. We hold the view that the fall of the previous Afghan government and its replacement by the Taliban was not inevitable. The response of the international community, led by the US and including Canada and other governments who followed suit, played a role in enabling this outcome when governments should have rather united to prevent it. Governments and civil society organizations alike now face the quagmire of continuing programs and delivering aid to Afghanistan while avoiding recognizing and therefore legitimizing the de facto authorities who are categorized as a terrorist entity, and rightfully so. The reality is these terrorists now govern close to 40 million people trapped in Afghanistan. Assuming the regime is there to stay, and it appears that this is what the international community has chosen to accept, as many of these people as possible need to be supported to leave. And this requires thinking creatively to develop multiple avenues for Afghans to resettle in places where they will be safe, such as partnerships with countries in the region and beyond, supporting other governments to permanently resettle groups of Afghans. We strongly urge Canada to take this approach in order to assist more Afghans to reach safety. In addition to robust support to those wishing to leave, Canada should also do what it can to meet the humanitarian and human rights needs of those left behind. And to be clear, these two things, human rights and humanitarian needs, are inseparable. Women breadwinners have lost their employment due to Taliban policies. The stories of families selling children or women selling their organs are not urban myths. These are true stories, and we hear them every single day. People are starving now. The human rights and humanitarian crises can only be understood together, and they can only be resolved together. This will require observing the fine balance of delivering meaningful assistance on the ground while not recognizing a regime that is not legitimate and is based on an ideology of violence and nihilism. Canada must, at every turn, vocally demand the rights of women be upheld. If a centerpiece of Canadian foreign policy is the feminist international assistance policy, then there is no place in the world where such a policy is more relevant than to the current situation in Afghanistan. Yet despite this, and despite the hundreds of millions of dollars invested in Afghanistan, at this time it is not coming across that Afghanistan is a priority foreign policy issue for Canada. A Canadian moral stance is missing. Besides courageous and outspoken diplomacy, we call for development assistance to both displaced Afghans and to Afghans in Afghanistan. And our position remains that despite current conditions, in fact, because of them, that the best place to invest is in human capital. Support programs that deliver education, build skills, increase employability, and therefore reduce poverty and vulnerability, and ultimately down the road contribute to rebuilding peace and pluralism. Despite the significant adaptations required, it is our intent to stay and deliver. But as we contend with the challenges of operating in Afghanistan, ironically, one of the greatest barriers we face at this time originates with our government. Our most critical challenge at this time is having staff on the ground whose departure from Afghanistan has not, or at least not yet, been facilitated by Canada, so they cannot leave. Yet, as you've already heard, given Justice Canada's classification of the Taliban as a terrorist entity, it has become complicated for foreign NGOs, to say the least, to pay personnel in Afghanistan. And stuck where they are, people who were contracted to work on Canadian government programming, but who can no longer be paid through these programs, are there at this very moment in danger. I trust that my government will not leave behind my Afghan colleagues who worked to deliver programming arising from our feminist international foreign policy based on principles that are fundamentally antithetical to the Taliban system of gender apartheid. We therefore urge the Government of Canada immediately to prioritize the processing and acceptance of special immigration measures applicants. And in support of SIM and other Afghans headed for Canada, we further urge that the government provide an alternative to visa documents for Afghans who do not have passports, and that Canada engage with countries in the region to ensure the right to safe passage of Afghans is upheld, which is not the case currently.
Thank you.
I know well that my colleagues are few among many. Most Afghans want to leave. No one deserves to live under tyranny. But our government holds the highest moral responsibility to Afghans who worked with us, who worked on Canadian programs funded by Canadian taxpayers reflecting Canadian values. We need to get them out, and we need to do it soon. At the same time,
thank you very much, Madam Oates. You are a minute over, so I would like to stop here. So thank you. You can add this during your time a little bit later on. So now I will go to the honourable members. First, We'll start with Mr. Hallan, then we'll go to Madam Jahid after that. Mr. Hallan, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. Mr. Mirzad, I just want to applaud what your organization has been doing. Actually, all the witnesses applaud all the great work that's going on. And Mr. Mirzad, your organization has been raising awareness for the persecution of religious minorities. And given that your organization's expertise and contacts within the Hazara community, did IRCC ever reach out to you to seek assistance with the refugee situation, whether it was during August 2021, before or after?
Thank you for the question, Honorable Member. And to respond to that question, we actually have reached out to IRCC and the Minister in the early stages of the crisis. And we've had some conversation with them, and we've had one meeting with former Minister Mendicino. But beyond that, we haven't had any interactions ever since.
What was the outcome of that meeting? Were there any requests put forward?
Well, we certainly had a very productive meeting with the minister at the time. We made some recommendations to them in terms of how we can move forward and how we could, as a organization that has ears on the ground, eyewitness account, to be useful, and also how to improve the processing of immigration, especially with prima facie and helping people that are outside of the border. We've had a number of recommendations. Unfortunately, up to this day, we haven't heard back from the government on any of those.
I would suspect that an election and a switch of ministers was probably in part due to that. Also, on top of that, we see record numbers of backlogs in immigration. We're almost at 2 million, which I would say are affecting a lot of these people that are trying to get here. Those recommendations that you made, out of one of them, there was, I believe there was one about removing the restrictions on current sponsorship programs and exempting some of those people so they could get here faster and to not provide proof of refugee status. Did the IRCC ever get back to you guys on that?
No, Honorable Member, no.
Not at all? Okay, so moving on, again, talking about the backlogs that we see, you raised a point, and that's something I hear in my office all the time as well, that there are refugees that are stuck in other countries right now, and their status is running out in those countries, and then they have to go back into the hands of the Taliban because they're sitting there waiting. And we heard about that case about the 10-year-old girl who was killed just waiting, and they had to wait because of the backlogs that this Canadian government, that this Liberal-made backlog has caused on the immigration system. Can you speak a little bit further to that?
Well, I will defer to my colleague, Professor Mali, who can better answer that question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. The management of immigration and refugee crisis has been a challenge for bureaucracies worldwide for a very long period of time. But the lesson of history is that it is exceedingly dangerous to allow intrusive bureaucratic requirements to interfere with emergency rescue when circumstances dictate that it's required. And the classic example was in 1939 when a vessel called the St. Louis, containing over 800 people of Jewish background, set out for North America in the hope of escaping from the tyranny in Nazi Germany. And they were turned away from Miami because they didn't fit within a quota system that had been put in place by a 1924 piece of legislation. They were then returned to Europe and disembarked in the Low Countries, and over a quarter of them were then killed in the Holocaust. And the lesson that flows from that is that bureaucracy can be life-threatening in these sorts of circumstances, and it often takes strong leadership within an individual state to recognize the need to cut through red tape expeditiously so that circumstances that are quite beyond the mindsets of those who are operating in normal circumstances don't end up having lethal consequences.
Thank you for that. Look, this crisis was some of the stuff that we're hearing about forced marriages, forced, conversions, and these forced rapes that are happening to the young women there. This was happening pre-2021. this was happening. I remember even in 2015 that there was, the Sikhs, the Hazaras, and the Hindu communities were all facing this persecution. Ms. Oates, prior to August 2021, were you hearing any of these things? And did your organization ever reach out to the Liberal government and explain this or give them the heads up?
Yeah, these have certainly existed prior to 2021. That there are, I mean, in a sense, pluralism is not well protected in Afghanistan, and that was the case under the previous government as well. And that's very well documented by organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. And we have brought these human rights violations and the issues faced by minorities in particular to the attention of this government and previous government over the years, for basically as long as we've existed.
Mr. Hallan,
I'll keep this.
Mr. Hallan, you have only 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds. You're already up.
I'll just keep it open. I'll just say, how do we, like, the speeding up of the processing is not going to happen. What can they do? What can this government do?
Ms. Oat, I have to go to the next one.
That's why we've seen the bureaucratic challenges as well, up close and personal. And although my own position is that the main measure above any others, security, privacy of information, et cetera, has to be human life. We have to find ways to get people out, and our government institutions have to find ways to operate as if it is an emergency. This is not business as normal. It's an emergency. And we should know that because of the historical examples like the one that Dr. Maley raised. So we have to just think completely differently than we're doing it right now. And we have to find multiple avenues, and we have to accept some level of risk in trying out new things that we've done before.
Thank you very much, Madam Oates. I have to cut you off now. So I will go to Honorable Member, Madam Jahid, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. I would like to focus my questioning on the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, and because they are clearly the most vulnerable with the return of the Taliban. So particularly, I'm concerned about the households with no male members, which can make it difficult or impossible for that household to go out and access the humanitarian aid which is needed for their survival. So I will ask Ms. Nasiri to go first, and then Ms. Oates. So if both of you can speak to the situation for women and girls and the situation for especially for those households without males, and what specific recommendations do you have for Canada to do to help those young girls and women?
Ms. Nasiri.
Thank you, the honorable member, for the question. As you said, how women and girls are especially at heightened risk as a result of the Taliban takeover, and those households without male kind of guardians are even more so. As we've seen, the Taliban have imposed strict measures, in certain provinces and areas that women cannot travel or go out without a male companion, for example, or women cannot, go to school or to university class that is, taught by a male professor. These are valid reports and concerns that we're seeing. And so, in terms of what the Canadian government can do, one is, make a increased investment in humanitarian aid groups that are focused on helping women and girls. In this crisis, like I've mentioned, there's predictions that up to 97% of Afghanistan will be in poverty by mid-2022. And so in that situation, we have to prioritize the people most at risk. And so, groups that prioritize women and girls should be prioritized in that funding. The second thing, and the final thing I will say is in negotiations or in diplomatic interactions or engagements with the Taliban, we need to use every opportunity we get to bring up things that are happening to women, such as the disappearances. Recently, we've heard about women and girls, and the Taliban being surprised that the international community is upholding them to that. So that pressure does work, and it does result in changes that we've seen the Taliban has allowed in some provinces for women to return to university recently. So funding essentially and diplomacy.
Dr. Oates,
If
please.
I can ask Ms.
Dr. Oates.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's important to have to try the strategy of combining humanitarian and development assistance. There's obviously a need for emergency assistance, like food aid, at a time when people are on the brink of starvation, but also the kind of assistance that can transform people's situations, access to school, to university, to work. Afghans need jobs right now. They need incomes as the unemployment rates have skyrocketed, and people can work remotely. So there's creative options out there, but we need Canadian legislation to enable these forms of assistance rather than restrict them, and to make sure that measures that are intended to not empower the Taliban don't victimize ordinary people who are trying to stay alive. And in any case, it's too late. The Taliban are empowered, right?
For both of you, do you have any estimate of the number of the woman-headed households in Afghanistan? Any numbers we have on the woman-headed households in Afghanistan?
I don't have recent data. I don't think there is recent data, but there's probably some older data that can be extrapolated from, and I can look that up and get it to you. I would just say it's very, very high, and it always has been high due to the previous chapters of war in the country. There's been an unusually high number of women-headed households compared to other countries there.
Yeah, if we can get that, that would be good. My next question is while Canada has made a strong commitments on resettlements, we know that resettlements alone cannot solve this crisis. How can we ensure that Afghan displaced in the country and those that have fled to neighboring countries, especially women, are cared for, and how can we work to develop the conditions to allow them to return safely back in Afghanistan? So I will ask Ms. Nasiri to comment on it, and then to Ms. Oates.
Yeah, I think the big issue here is preventing the crisis in Afghanistan from getting worse to the point where, there is a need for managing the increased number of Afghans who will inevitably exit if the crisis gets worse. So it's the things that we're calling for, which is, removing barriers for humanitarian aid groups to get funding and goods and services to the people of Afghanistan. If Afghans feel like they're receiving services that they need, like healthcare, like food, like shelter, then that disincentivizes them from leaving their country, because of course, no one wants to leave unless they have to. And so Canada can play a major role there. But I will say that resettlement, Canada has made commitments, but so far has fallen short of upholding them. And so resettlement is a part of a temporary solution for those who aren't able to wait, for the international community to respond.
Thank you, Madam Jahid. Your time is up now.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And now I will go to Mr. Brunel Decep, then Madam Kwan for 6 minutes each, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to start by thanking all of our witnesses who are in attendance here this evening for this important study that we all care so much about. Mr. Muazad, you said that in June 2021 at the Human Rights Committee that I co-chaired at the time, and you appeared, and I thank you for coming back again. Your testimony struck me at the time. There was a particular sentence that you uttered. You said the life of a Hazara in Afghanistan is someone condemned to death who's waiting for their execution, basically. And I think that that sentence is all the more pertinent today. And it attests to the life of the majority of Afghans, whether they're Hazara or not. For those who are trying to escape Afghanistan, is that when they should call on organisations such as yours for assistance, response? Well, thank you very much to the Member of Parliament for this highly relevant and important question. In response to your question, sir, it is true that the entire Afghan people is suffering in Afghanistan. The Taliban are an enemy to all Afghans. When the world left Afghanistan, or when Afghans tried to cross the border and leave Afghanistan to go to Pakistan, for example, it is quite the trip in and of itself and is dangerous and perilous. And then oftentimes they end up in refugee camps in Quetta or other locations, and they have to face the harsh reality of the danger on the ground there. For example, there is no official presence of the United Nations there currently. The United Nations have representation under contract with organizations that are contracted into with the Pakistani government and the UN. So these individuals who have to go to the offices to get documents that register them, but they are not a legal document, and they are susceptible to being arrested at any moment and being deported back to Afghanistan. Just crossing the border nowadays is in and of itself extremely difficult. If you recall the crowd at the Kabul airport, well, it's 3 times worse than that number of people lined up on the border at these border crossings. And oftentimes they have to pay off Afghan officials in order to be able to cross. There's that fact too. In addition to all of those risks and perils, once they've crossed the border, well, they can be caught at any point by the Pakistani authorities and sent back to Afghanistan. Question: for what I understand, that Canada doesn't have any representation out on the ground to help those folks. There are no special programs, nothing of the sort. Response: unfortunately, that is the case, and that is one of the suggestions that we made in a number of open letters to the Canadian government, seeking official representation in Pakistan, in Iran, neighbouring countries, to have engaged in a dialogue, and in order to have a process such as our friends the Germans have, for example. The Germans have a process that they put in place in collaboration with the Pakistani government, such that these individuals can be processed and their papers can be worked on, and they're asked not to be deported or sent back to Afghanistan in the meantime. It's that kind of process that we would like to see the Canadian government implement alongside Pakistan. Question: well, there are some examples of our allies that could guide us in terms of solutions, and we're here to find solutions, aren't we, sir? Now, when you appeared before the committee in June 2021, you called on others to support the piece of legislation that would ensure that all development assistance from Canada would contribute to the prosperity and safety in that country. But there was an election. That bill died on the order paper. Are you still calling for that to occur? Yes, absolutely. This legislation is all the more important and relevant than ever. Now, prior to the writ being dropped, well, before the country fell to the Taliban's, well, the legislation was to ensure that financial assistance that went to Afghanistan would be divvied up equally throughout the country and not concentrated on certain factions or geographical zones. Now that the Taliban is back, it is absolutely crucial to ensure that the assistance that goes to Afghanistan doesn't fall in the hands of the Taliban, but in the hands of those who desperately need that assistance. Question: well, what you'd ask members of this committee is that when the committee's report is drafted, that recommendation be present, akin to what was in the legislation. We'll obviously need a new bill and a new number, but that's what you're calling for. Yes. And if I could just conclude with this. In recent months, when the United Nations and other international organizations have provided assistance to Afghanistan, and which has fallen in the hands of the Taliban, they have forced the Afghans to work for the Taliban to get their hands on this emergency relief funding in order to get food, rice, wheat. And the Taliban have said, you have to work for us in order to get these funds. Mr. Chairman, do I have any time left? I'm just trying to...
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We will go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Thank you to all the witnesses for their presentations and, of course, for their ongoing work in providing assistance to those who are faced with a humanitarian crisis. Um, my first question, actually, to Ms. Nazari and to also Ms. Oakes. It centers around the comments you made around the need to ensure that Canadian organizations that are in Afghanistan right now would be able to provide assistance, whether it be aid to children who are dying of malnutrition or to women and girls, local organizations on the ground. They are unable to do so because of Canada's anti-terrorism laws. In the previous panel, I asked the organizations if they would support this. That if a legal agreement were to be entered into between the Canadian government and those organizations that are long established here in providing humanitarian aid, would that be sufficient for them to provide humanitarian aid in Afghanistan? So that is to say that if the Canadian government provided some sort of measure outside of legislative changes to ensure that staff would not be prosecuted and the organization would not face repercussions in relation to any potential violation of the criminal code. So my first question, or my first witness to answer the question is Ms. Nassari, and then I'll go to Ms. Oates.
Thank you, Member, for the question. As I mentioned, we've heard concerning reports directly from smaller humanitarian charities working on the ground that they're receiving resistance from banks here domestically and and problems in Afghanistan with getting aid and goods there because of this law. So certainly we do think that an MOU essentially would be an acceptable temporary measure. Though we think that we need to make sure that there's some guidance, explicit guidance, like publicly provided as well, so that banks, for example, can be reassured that it wouldn't count as criminal activity, and that smaller charity groups that have been operating for a long time are not excluded from such measures.
I would echo that. I think that there are models that we can look to, like the exemptions or licenses that are issued to organizations by the U.S. government to be able to continue their work on the ground. We ourselves do our own agreements with vendors and partners we work with to ensure that no funds of ours end up in the hands of the Taliban. So that would be a very important measure. And in addition, I'd echo the challenges from the Canadian banks are very significant in terms of being able to move funds. And so if that can be alleviated at all, it would go a long way as well.
Sorry, I'd like to turn to another question related to the situation on the ground. We've heard from presenters around the refugee or immigration measures, how it's almost impossible. In fact, in many cases, it is impossible for people who are still in Afghanistan to be able to get to safety. And the suggestion was to ensure that the Canadian government brought in special immigration measures, such as temporary residence permits to be issued to those who need to get to safety immediately, as well as waiving the requirements for documentations. So I'd just like to actually just run down to the organizations around this. Is this something that you would call for the government to enact immediately? Ms. Nazari?
The short answer is absolutely. And we've heard, like one of the members mentioned, a 10-year-old girl who was eligible under one of these programs to come died because her application was delayed. And recently, last week, we heard of an unnamed brother of a Canadian embassy worker who was killed presumably by the Taliban in Afghanistan because of whose application was delayed because of paperwork. So absolutely, we think these measures would work.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Ms. Oakes and then to Mr. Mazad on the same question, please.
Absolutely. I think we need to forge agreements with other governments. Again, this is something the U.S. has done, and we have followed suit in so many U.S.-driven policies in Afghanistan that had bad outcomes for Afghans. It would be good if we also emulated some that could have good outcomes. And I would emphasize that the danger is not in leaving Afghanistan, it's in staying in Afghanistan. And I think that that was, tragically exemplified in the case of the girl in Kandahar who was killed, who was waiting to come to Canada. We as a small NGO have been able to get 8 families out without any assistance from government on our own. I can't say it was easy, but we did it. And many other organizations have done the same. So if we had the government supporting us to do the same, we could do so much more. We could get people out.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mazar?
Yeah, thank you so much, Honorable Member, for the question. And absolutely, I mean, I'm echoing what our friend Ms. Nasiri and Ms. Oates said, that there needs to be a dialogue. I've said this earlier, that the presence of Canada on the ground in Pakistan is, in its way, one form of dialogue that Canada must have with Pakistan. In a similar fashion, Canada can have, in terms of a dialogue, not directly with the Taliban, but through intermediary, such as Qatar or the UAE, to forge a alliance that can help people get out, such as the programs that the Americans are established.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. So I have to go to Mr. Raff and then Madam Damoff for 4 minutes each, and then I'll come back 2 minutes each to Mr. Brunel Desep and Madam Kwan. Mr. Raff, 4 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair, and look, my thanks to all the witnesses for coming. Your testimony is phenomenal, and I really do like that you've all provided some great recommendations on the way ahead. As I've told the previous panel, if you're not aware, I mean, I spent a year plus of my life over there in uniform, left 6 of my own soldiers over there. But what keeps me up and still has me so concerned is the future, especially the women and children in that country under the Taliban, and we need to do what we can to get those that need to get out now. And so I think that's the key focus. And again, the strong leadership that's required by our current government to make decisions and work around this, I think, is essential on all aspects here. So I'd like all the groups to just weigh in quickly on, in particular, the need to utilize our international organizations and other groups for that foot on the ground, to get that feedback back to the Canadian government, to get these people in need out as quickly as possible, and to streamline the whole refugee process in this case, and to have some exceptions. If we can go to the Afghan youth engagement, Ms. Naziri first, please.
Ms. Naziri.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I wasn't clear on what the question was, but I believe you're asking about measures to accelerate the exit of women and girls. I think the quickest thing and the most impactful thing would be to waive documentation requirements. That's the number one reason we're hearing about delays. So refugee status determination cards, passports, taskiras, which is the official ID card in Afghanistan, biometrics and medical exams. Those things should be waived and worked on once groups are evacuated, individuals and groups are evacuated and arrive in Canada. So that's, in short, that's the main measure that we think can make a big impact.
Thanks. That's perfect. Mr. Mirzad or Professor Milley?
I'll just add a comment, and I'll let my colleague, Dr. Malley, to answer. But thank you so much for the honorable member for your question and for your service to my country. We owe you a debt of gratitude. It's unfortunate that your sacrifices, despite your sacrifices, the country has come to the state and shape that it is today. To answer your question, I'll just echo what my friend Ms. Naziri said. It's the documentation, the nuances of the processes. We're dealing with a country that's surrounded by Taliban, that's governed by the Taliban. There's no electricity, there's no internet, and we're expecting to get people to fill up forms, do this with the lack of technology. People are using WhatsApp, which is even very risky because the Taliban's intelligence units are now cracking down on people. We've heard horror stories of people fleeing the country and having their phone confiscated and hacked. So the Taliban 2.0 is not the Taliban of the 90s. They are smarter with the technology to be a threat. So we need to remove those nuances and get people out of danger.
Briefly, please.
Thank you. Yes, there are a couple of points that I would make there. One is that diplomacy is important in this respect with Pakistan, but also with Iran. Iran is a very significant destination for people exiting Afghanistan at the moment. And just 3 days ago, there was an article published in the New York Times that suggested that up to 1 million people were on the move in southwestern Afghanistan in the direction of Iran just in the last 4 months. And that means that it's highly likely that there will be a number of extremely vulnerable people there who would probably need resettlement, not least because Iran is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention and owes no duties under that convention to those who are within its borders. The other point I'd like to emphasize is an emphatic endorsement of the point that Ms. Oates was making about the status of the Taliban as a terrorist group. If one looks at this not from an emotional point of view, but purely from an analytical point of view, they tick every box that you need to tick in defining a group as a terrorist group. Under the circumstances, it's very important that diplomacy not be conducted in such a way as normalizes their participation in international society, because that will have wider ramifications for other groups that see that kind of thing happening.
Thank you, Mr. Melly. It's way over time. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raff. And I will go to now Madam Damoff for 4 minutes, please.
Whoops. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm trying to get my time going. Dr. Oates, I have been attending the dinner party in Oakville for about 15 years, long before I was a member of Parliament. And I first want to thank you for everything that you have been doing in Afghanistan. I recall I think it was in March of 2020, one of the last things that we did in the before times, when you expressed concerns at the dinner party about the negotiations the United States was doing with the Taliban, that you expressed concerns about where the direction the country was going and the challenges you were facing at the time. And I remember feeling sick hearing what you were talking about. And not all people can leave Afghanistan. So you've talked a lot about the importance of getting women out, but they can't all leave. You've been doing work on the ground for 20 years. Fixing the legislation is a priority for the government. So I guess my question is, how, assuming that we are able to get around the issue of getting aid directly to the folks you're supporting in Afghanistan, are you going to be able to deliver your education programs? And are there anything else that we should flag in order for you to deliver the programs that you're delivering in Afghanistan?
Yes, we have not stopped delivering programs. We've continued to do it, but in much adapted format. We've had to be creative and pivot things, but we are still delivering, and we are fortunate to benefit from a ICT infrastructure that allows us to do that right now. Many people can still access the internet, and we have other tools for those who can't, where we can use technology as a shortcut to get to people and make sure they can still get education. But we're a bit exhausted because on top of that, we're also trying to respond to the emergency, to the fact that people need very basic things like food as well as education. And we're also trying to evacuate and protect the lives of our staff. So if the government lifted that off of our shoulders, that would allow us to do even more. So that's one of my key priorities, so we can get back to our core business of focusing on the rights of women and girls and making sure they're protected. And just to come to your first point about the negotiations, I want to, and to build on something Dr. Maley said as well, this is not just an issue about Afghanistan and the security of that region. The moment that the US started negotiating with the Taliban, this was a signal to groups like the Taliban, like ISIS, like Boko Haram. This was very encouraging for them. And so, even if people who perhaps don't really care about the fate of women and girls, or the moral perspective here, we should care from a pragmatic perspective what this means for like-minded organizations in the world, watching carefully how we're responding to the Taliban and the risk of normalizing them.
Afghanistan has one of the highest rates of people living with disabilities in the world. It's about 80% of Afghans have a disability, and that impacts the number of women that are heading up households because their husbands have lost their legs, for example, from a landmine, and so they're the sole supporter. And you touched on that a bit in your opening comments about the number of women supporting households. Are you seeing we know there's a crisis in Afghanistan right now, but I think I'm hoping that we should be putting a focus on the people with disability and its impact on women and girls being able to provide a livelihood and support their families.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Some of your time is up, and now I got to go to Mr. Brunel Desab for 2 minutes, and then Madam Kwan for 2 minutes.
Well, I'll be quick. I'd like to thank all witnesses for participating in our panel this evening. It's just so crucial. Here's what I'd like to ask all witnesses. What would be your top priority that you'd like to see appear in the recommendations in this committee's report? Your top priority. It's an open question for all witnesses, please. If I may take a stab at that first. Thank you very much for this opportunity to appear before the committee and also for this open-ended question. To my mind, the two top priorities, and this has been underscored throughout this entire session, first, to eliminate all the prerequisites, the technical and administrative documentation processes. For example, if somebody is without the internet or electricity, they shouldn't have to fill out an application while they're being shot at by the Taliban or being whipped. So this kind of administrative burden should be scrapped. Also, eliminate the mandate such that individuals must have a refugee status. This would help everyone, broadly speaking. Often Canadians would like to bring more people to Canada, but unfortunately they're not able to because of the refugee issue. Thirdly, use diplomacy alongside our allies on the ground in Pakistan and in other neighbouring countries so that Afghans can escape through those channels. Thank you very much.
Time is up. I'm sorry.
Thank you to the witnesses.
Madam Kwan for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, just want to build on that. The requirement of a UNHCR refugee determination is prohibitive. People cannot get access to that. Should the government waive this requirement? I think I'm going to go to Ms. Oates, Mr. Maley, and then Ms. Nazari.
Yes, please. That it needs to be waived. It's I have heard firsthand accounts of people who have been attempting to get that status for months. They've reached a safe country, or nominally safe in any case, relatively safe, like Pakistan, and they can't get that, and their visas will run out, and they'll be back. That's very important.
Thank you. Mr. Maley, quickly, and then Ms. Nazari.
Yes, I totally agree with that. It becomes a theatre of the absurd if Canadian resettlement or Australian resettlement or whatever is hostage to the bureaucratic efficiency and the resource endowments that some third agency may or may not manifest. And I think that should be replaced with a much more system.
Ms. Nazari?
Echoing my two colleagues, absolutely, that would be very impactful if instituted immediately. And the immigration minister certainly is empowered by legislation. I believe the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, Section 25.2, to make exemptions and essentially fast track people at high risk based on their judgment.
Well, we've done it before, as you presented. We can do it again. Most certainly is required for this situation. Mr. Murad, you actually raised the issue of the government in private sponsorships. The limitations related to that with the group of five is impossible because people have to get refugee determination to even apply. Should the government open up the privately sponsored refugees for all the streams and waive the requirement?
Madam Kwan, your time is up. So I have to be very, very strict on this one. So I appreciate that. On behalf of all members of Parliament, I would like to thank the witnesses for the excellent input that you provided. If you want to submit in writing, you are welcome to. And also, on behalf of all the members, I would like to thank Madam Clerk, yourself, the analysts, the interpreters, and of course the technical team for staying overtime for 15 minutes to help us. And thank you. All the best. Goodbye. And is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.